Hello everyone, it's me Uncle Dan. Today I am going to read Essex 1691, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Pip's sister is attacked. In a single year, everything had changed. Before I went to Miss Havisham's and met Estella, I had always wanted to be apprenticed to Joe, and I had always been happy at home, in spite of my sister's scolding. Now I was ashamed of my home and my work. I was very miserable because of Joe. However, I stayed at the forge. I did my best to work hard. I'm glad that I never told him how unhappy I was then. I tried to follow his example and become an honest, happy, hard-working man. But all the time I thought of Estella. My worst fear was that one day she would come to the forge and see me working as a common blacksmith with black face and hands. She would certainly turn away in disgust. In the evenings, I studied as hard as I could, educating myself. For Estella, whatever I learned, I shared with Joe, not, I'm afraid, so that he would be more educated, but so that I would be less ashamed of him in front of Estella. One Sunday, Joe and I went out on the marshes, as usual, to study together. I don't think he ever remembered anything from one week to the next, but he smoked his pipe comfortably, looking as intelligent as he could. I had a question I had been intending to ask him. Joe, do you think I should visit Miss Havisham again? Well, Pip, said Joe, will she think you expect her to give you something? She told me she shouldn't give you anything else, but Joe, I've been apprenticed nearly a year now, and I have never thanked her. That's true, Pip, said Joe slowly. Could you give me a half day's holiday tomorrow, Joe? I would like to visit Miss Havisham. Her name isn't Esther Bisham. As far as I know, Pip, said Joe, very seriously. I know, Joe. Please, Joe. All right, Pip, but if she isn't happy to see you, better not go again. Joe had another blacksmith working for him at the forge. His name was Oleg, and he had no friends or family in the village. He was a big, strong, lazy man who moved about in a strangely unhurried way, his shoulders bent and his eyes on the ground. For some reason, he never liked me, even when I was a child. When I became Joe's apprentice, he seemed to hate me. When he heard about my half-day holiday, he threw down his hammer angrily. Come now, mister, he said to Joe. If young Phippy is having a holiday, give me the one too. Give me one too. Well, nodded Joe. After thinking for a moment, I will. Just then my sister, who had secretly been listening outside the forge, called to Joe to one of the window. You fool. You think you're a rich man giving a holiday to a lazy man like that, Oleg? I wish I were his master. I'd soon show him. You want to be everybody's master? Oleg told her angrily. And what's more, you're a wicked, ugly old woman. What did you say? Cried my sister, beginning to scream. Oh, what did you call me? Hold me, someone. Little by little, she was deliberately making herself angry. Joe and I had seen this happen many times before. Hold you, said Oleg in disgust. If you were my wife, I'd hold you tight round the neck until you couldn't breathe. Oh, screamed my sister. Me, a married woman, being spoken to like that? In my own house, and my husband standing nearby? Oh. And like a mad woman, she pulled her hair loose and rushed at the forge door, which I had luckily locked. But Joe had no choice. He had to challenge Oleg to fight. But Joe was the strongest man in the village. And very soon Oleg, like the pale young gentleman, was lying on the ground. Then Joe unlocked the door and picked up my sister, who had dropped unconscious to the ground. But only after watching the fight through the window, she stayed in the kitchen for the rest of the day, and Joe and Oleg shared a glass of beer peacefully together in the forge. That afternoon, when I arrived at Miss Havisham's house, it wasn't Estella who opened the gate, but a cousin of the old lady's. Miss Havisham looked just the same as before. Well, she said, I hope you don't expect me to give you anything. No, indeed, Miss Havisham. I only want you to know that I'm very grateful to you for helping me become Joe's apprentice. Great. Come and see me again on your birthday. She cried suddenly. You are looking for Estella, aren't you? Answer. Yes, I admit it. I hope Miss Estella is well. She's abroad, receiving a lady's education. She's more beautiful than ever and admired by all who see her. Do you feel you have lost her? She gave such an unpleasant laugh with these last words that I didn't know what to say, and as I left the house, I felt even more miserable. On my way through town, I met Mr. Wopsle. Together we started the long walk home to the village. It was a dark, wet, misty night. We could only just see someone ahead of us. Hello, we called. Is that Ollie? Yes, he answered. I'll walk home with you. Been in town all afternoon, I have. Did you hear the big gun firing from the prison ships? Must be some prisoners who have escaped. They made me think of my convict. We didn't talk anymore, but walked along in silence. We heard the gun fighting several times. It was late by the time we got to the village, and we were surprised to see lights on at the pub and people running in and out. Mr. Wopsle went in to discover what was happening, and after a few minutes rushed out calling something wrong up at the forge. Pip, run. Perhaps it was an escaped convict who got into the house while Joe was out. Someone has been attacked. We didn't stop running until we reached the forge. In Mrs. Joe's kitchen there was a doctor and Joe and a group of women, and on the floor in the middle of them all was my sister, lying unconscious. She'd never scold us again. Joe had been at the pub that evening, and when he arrived home just before 10, he found her on the floor. Nothing had been stolen. She had been hit violently on the back of the head with a heavy weapon. On the floor beside her was a convict's iron chain. It did not belong to the prisoners who had escaped that day. The police spent the next week investigating the attack, but did not arrest anybody. I felt sure the iron chain belonged to my convict, but I did not think he had attacked my sister. The attacker could have been either Oleg or the stranger who had shown me the file. But several witnesses had seen Oleg in town all evening. My only reason for suspecting him was his quarrel with my sister. But she had quarreled with everyone in this village 10,000 times, and if the stranger had come to ask for his 2 pounds back, my sister would gladly have given it to him, so I couldn't imagine who her attacker was. She lay ill in bed for a long time. She could not speak or understand much, and her character was greatly changed. She had become quiet, patient, and grateful for all our care. She used to write a word or draw a picture when she wanted something, and we tried to discover what she meant. She needed someone to take care of her all the time. Luckily, old Mrs. Wopsle had just died, so Biddy came to live with us. She understood my sister perfectly and looked after us all very well. One day my sister drew a tea and seemed to want it very much. I brought a toast. Tea, but Biddy knew immediately it's not a tea, it's Oleg's hammer. Because she's forgotten her name, but she wanted to see Oleg. She expected to see my sister accuse Oleg of attacking her, but instead she seemed very pleased to see him. She often used to ask for him after that, and nobody knew why. One Sunday, I asked Biddy to come for a walk on the marshes. Biddy, I said seriously, promise to keep this a secret. I am going to tell you something. I want to be a gentleman. Don't you think you're happier as you are? She replied. I had often wondered this myself, but I didn't want to hear it from her. It's a pity, I know. I said it would have been much better if I could have been happy working at the forge. Perhaps you and I would have spent more time together. I would have been good enough for you, wouldn't I, Biddy? Oh yes, she said sadly, but I don't ask for very much. The point is, I continued crossly, if nobody had told me I was coarse and common, I wouldn't have thought about it. The Biddy looked at me interested. There wasn't a polite thing to say. Who said it? It was the beautiful young lady at Miss Havisham's, and I admire her greatly, and I want to be a gentleman for her. The words rushed out before I could stop them. Biddy said gently, she may not be worth the trouble, Pip. That may be true, but I can't stop myself admiring her. Biddy was the most sensible of girls and did not try to persuade me anymore. As we walked home, I felt rested and comforted. Pip, what a fool you are, I said to myself. I realized how much happier I would always be with Biddy than with Estella. Biddy, I wish I could make myself fall in love with you. I said suddenly, you don't mind my speaking so openly, as you are such an old friend. No, of course not. But you never will fall in love with me, you see, she answered, a little sadly. I wondered if I should continue working with Joe in a plain, honest way of life, and perhaps marry Biddy or dare. I hope that Miss Havisham would make my fortune and marry me to Estella. Chapter 6, Great Expectations. One Saturday evening, when I had been apprenticed to Joe for 4 years, he and I were sitting in the pub with some of the villagers, listening to Mr. Wopsle. He was giving a dramatic reading of a newspaper report of a murder trial, and we all enjoyed watching him act the main character. His witnesses were old and feeble. His lawyers were clever and sharp-eyed. His accused was a violent, wicked murderer. Suddenly, we became aware of a strange gentleman who had also been listening and was now looking coldly at us. Well, he said to us, biting the side of his finger, "So you have decided the accused was the murderer, have you?" "Sir," answered Mr. Wopsle firmly, "yes, I do think he is guilty." We all nodded our heads in agreement. "But," said the stranger, "do you or do you not know that the law of England supposes every man to be innocent until he is proved to be guilty?" "Sir," began Mr. Wopsle, "as an Englishman myself, come," said the stranger, "don't avoid the question. Either you know it or you don't know it. Which is it?" "Of course I know it," answered the poor Mr. Wopsle. "Then why didn't you say so at first?" Another question. "Do you know that this trial isn't finished yet?" Mr. Wopsle hesitated, and we all began to have a rather bad opinion of him. "And you're going to say that the accused was guilty before the end of the trial, before he has been proved guilty?" We realized that the unfortunate Wopsle had no understanding of the law, indeed anything at all. Now the stranger stood in front of our little group. "I'm looking for the blacksmith, Joe Gargery, and he is apprentice Pip." He did not recognize me, but I knew he was the gentleman I had met on the stairs when visiting Miss Havisham. There was even the same smell of a perfumed soap on his large hand. "I want to speak to you two in private," he said, and so Joe and I left the pub and walked home with him. "My name is Jaggers, and I'm a lawyer," he said. When he reached the forge, "Joe Gargery, I am sent by someone who suggests canceling this boy's apprenticeship to you. Would you want any money if you lost your apprentice?" "I would never stand in Pip's way, never," said Joe, staring. "The answer is no." "Don't try to change that answer later," said Mr. Jaggers. "Now, what I have to say, and remember, I'm only an agent, I don't speak for myself, is that this young man has great expectations." Joe and I gasped and looked at each other. "I've been told to say that he will be very rich when he is older. In addition, the person who sent me wants the young man to be removed from his home and educated as a gentleman who expects to inherit a fortune." My dream had come true. Miss Havisham was making me rich. "Now, Mr. Pip," continued the lawyer, "there are two conditions. The first is that you always use the name of Pip. The second is that the name of the person who's been so generous to you must remain secret until that person chooses to tell you. You are forbidden to ask any questions or try to discover who the person is. Do you accept these conditions?" My heart was beating fast as I whispered, "Yes." "Now, two details. I've been given enough money for you to live in the life of a gentleman in London. While you are studying, you will come to me to ask for whatever you need. I suggest Mr. Matthew Pocket as a teacher." I remember that was the name of one of Miss Habit's relations, the one who did not visit her often. "You must buy some new clothes. Shall I leave you 20 pounds. He counted 20 coins out of his large purse onto the table. And when can you come to London? Next Saturday? I agreed. Feeling very confused, he looked at Joe, who seemed even more confused. Well, Joe Gargery, perhaps I can only say. I only say, perhaps I promised nothing, he said, throwing his purse carelessly from one hand to another. Perhaps I've been told to give you a present when you lose your apprentice. Joe put his great strong hand on my shoulder in the gentlest possible way. Pip can go freely to fortune and happiness. He knows that. But if you think that money can ever pay me back for losing the little child who came to the forge and always the best of friends, he could not continue. Dear Joe, I was so ready to leave you and so ungrateful to you. I can see you now with your strong blacksmith's arm in front of your eyes and your shoulders shaking and tears on your cheeks falling down. But at the same time, I was so excited by my good luck that I forgot what I owed to Joe. Mr. Jaggers clearly thought Joe was a fool for refusing money and left the house, reminding me to go straight to his office in London in a week's time. Joe told Biddy what had happened and both congratulated me. They were very quiet and said at first, because I would be leaving them, but I promised I would never forget them and would often return to visit them. Biddy tried to explain the good news to my sister, but the poor woman could not understand. As Joe and Biddy became a little more cheerful, discussing my possible plans for the future, I became more miserable. Now that I could be a gentleman, as I had always wished it, I was not sure if I wanted to leave my home, which was full of happy memory. That week passed slowly. I took a last walk through the churchyard to the marshes. At least I need never think about my convict again. No doubt he was dead by now. I had something special to ask Biddy. Biddy, I said, when we were alone, don't you think you could teach Joe a bit? What do you mean, teach him? Well, I love the old Joe more than anyone else, but his education and manners could be improved. Biddy opened her eyes very wide. Oh, so his manners aren't good enough then? Oh, they are all right for here, but when I receive my fortune, I'll want him to meet important people and behave correctly. Haven't you ever thought, not looking at me, that he wouldn't want to meet important people? He wouldn't want to be taken away from his job that he does well and the village where he has loved? Nah, Biddy, I said crossly. Aren't you jealous of my good luck? I didn't expect this of you. This is the best side of your character, Biddy. Whether you scold me or thank me, I'll always do my best for the family at all times. And I'll always remember you, whatever you think of me, said poor Biddy. I was not pleased with this interview and thought it was strange that the news of my expectation had not made me happier. When I went into town to order my new clothes, Mr. Pumblechook was waiting for me at the door of his shop. My dear friend, if you will allow me to call you that, he cried, shaking both my hands. Let me congratulate you on your fortune. Nobody deserves it more than you. He seemed so much more sensible than before that I agreed to have lunch with him. And I think, he said happily, that I, Pumblechook, was able to help in my small way by taking you to play at Miss. Remember, I stopped him. You must never say anything about the person who is being so generous to me. Don't worry, trust me, my dear friend. Have some wine, have some chicken. A chicken you didn't think when you're running around on the farm that you'd be lucky enough to be served to one. Who? May I? May I? And he jumped up to shake my hand again. We drank our wine. Pumblechook reminded me of the happy times he and I had spent together during my childhood. I did not remember it quite like that, but I began to feel he was a good-hearted, sincere man. He wanted to ask my advice on a business matter. He said he was hoping to find a young gentleman who would put money into his business and seemed very interested in my opinion. And may I? May I? He shook hands with me again. You know, I always used to say, the boy will make his fortune. He's no ordinary boy. He has certainly kept his opinion very secret, I thought. There was one person I really wanted to visit before going to London, dressed in my new clothes. I went to Miss Havisham's house, where her cousin opened the gate to me again. Oh, well, Pip, said Miss Havisham to me when she saw me. I'm going to London tomorrow, Miss Havisham, I said. Choosing my words correctly, I wanted to say goodbye. I've been so lucky since I saw you last, and I'm so grateful for it. Good, good, she replied, looking delightedly at her cousin, who was staring at my new clothes. I know about it. I've seen Mr. Jaggers. So a rich person has adopted you. Yes, Miss Havisham. She smiled cruelly at her cousin, who was looking rather ill. Remember to do what Mr. Jaggers tells you, and you will always keep the name of Pip. Won't you? Goodbye, Pip. She gave me her hand, and I kissed it. It seemed the natural thing to do, and so I left the old lady in her bride dress in the candlelight, with the dusty furniture around her. On Saturday morning, I was in such a hurry that I only said a quick goodbye to my family before setting out to walk the few miles into town for the London coach. As I left the peaceful, sleeping village, the mist over the marshes was rising to show me the great unknown world I was entering. Suddenly I realized what I was leaving behind: my childhood, my home, and Joe. Then I wished I had asked him to walk with me to the coach, and I could not stop crying. Whenever the horses were changed on the journey, I wondered with an aching heart whether to get down and go back to say goodbye properly. But the mist had completely risen now, and my new world lay ahead of me. Chapter 7. Pip arrives in London. At that time, everybody in England agreed that London was a wonderful city. So I was surprised to find it rather ugly, with narrow, dirty streets and people crowded into tiny houses. I was frightened by its huge size. Smithfield, the meat market. I was just shocked by the dirt and blood everywhere. Then I came to Newgate Prison, where a drunk old man showed me the place where prisoners were hanged, told me exactly the 4 men would die there tomorrow. I was disgusted by this news. My first impression of London couldn't have been worse. However, I managed to find Mr. Jaggers' office, noticing that other people were waiting for the great man too. After some time he appeared, walking towards me. His clients all rushed at him together. He spoke to some and pushed the others away. One man held on to the lawyer's sleeve. Please, Mr. Jagger, my brother is accused of stealing silver. Only you can save him. I'm ready to pay anything. Your brother? Repeated the lawyer. And the trial is tomorrow? Well, I'm sorry for you and him. I'm on the other side. No, Mr. Jagger, cried the man desperately, tears in his eyes. Don't say you're against him. I'll pay anything. Get out of my way, said Mr. Jaggers, and we left the man on his knees on the pavement. Now Mr. Jaggers turned to me and told me that on Monday I would go to Matt Parker's house to start my studies, but until then I would stay with his son, Herbert, who lived nearby. The Wemmick, Mr. Jaggers' clerk, showed me the way to Mr. Parker's room. He was a short, dry man with a square, expressionless face, between 40 and 50 years old. His mouth was so wide that it looked like a post box and gave the impression of smiling all the time. Is London a very wicked place? I asked him, trying to make conversation as we talked. You may be robbed or murdered in London, but that may happen to you anywhere if there is any profit in it for the criminal. I was not sure whether I looked forward to living in London, but people like the Wemmick accepted crime so calmly. We arrived at Herbert Parker's and rented rooms. The building was the dirtiest I had ever seen, with broken windows and dirty doors. We stood in a little square with dying trees around it, and I looked in horror at Mr. Wemmick. Ah, he said, not understanding my look. Its quiet position makes you think of the country. I quite agree. Goodbye, Mr. Pip. I went up the stairs, where there was a note on Mr. Parker's door saying, returning soon. His idea of soon was not the same as mine. About half an hour later, I heard the footsteps rushing upstairs, and a young man of my age appeared breathless at the door. Mr. Pip, he said, I'm so sorry I'm late. I greeted him in a confused manner, unable to believe my eyes. Suddenly he looked closely at me and gasped, But you're the boy at Miss Havisham's. And you, I said, are the pale young gentleman? We both started laughing and shook hands. Well, he said, I hope you will forgive me for having knocked you down that day. In fact, I had knocked him down, but I didn't contradict him. Do you know why I was there? He asked. I had been invited to Miss Havisham's to see if she liked me, I suppose. I didn't make a good impression on her. If she had liked me, I could be a rich man and engaged to Estella by now. Were you disappointed? I asked. Oh, I don't want to marry Estella. She's a hard, proud girl. Miss Havisham has brought her up to break men's hearts. It's a revenge on all men. Is she a relation to Miss Havisham's? I asked. Not only adopted. Why were you at Miss Havisham's then? To make my fortune, the same as you. But I was lucky. You know, Mr. Jagger is Miss Havisham's lawyer. It was kind of him to suggest that my father should teach you. My father is Miss Havisham's cousin, you know. Herbert Pocket made an excellent impression on me. He always spoke openly and honestly. There was nothing secret or mean in his character, and we soon became good friends. And I told him of my past life in the village and my expectations. Called me Herbert. Wow, would you mind my calling you Handel? There's a wonderful piece of music by Handel called The Blacksmith, which reminds me of you. Of course, I agreed, and as we sat down to dinner, Herbert told me Miss Havisham's sad story. Her mother died young. Her father was very rich and very proud, with only one child, Miss Havisham, by his first wife. Then he married his cook and had a son by her. This son, a half-brother to Miss Havisham, was a bad character and didn't inherit as much from his father as Miss Havisham did, and so perhaps he was angry with her for influencing her father against him. Anyway, a certain man appeared and pretended he was in love with Miss Havisham. She was certainly in love with him and gave him whatever money he asked for. My father was the only one of her relations who dared to tell her that this man should not be trusted. He was so angry that she ordered my father straight out of the house, and he has never seen her since. Her other relations were not interested in her happiness, but only in inheriting her wealth. So they said nothing. The couple fixed the wedding day. The guests were invited. The dress and the cakes were brought to the house. They came, but the man did not. He wrote a letter, which she received at 20 to 9. When she was dressing for her wedding, I said, yes. So she stopped the clocks at that moment. She was very ill for a while, and since then has not seen daylight. People think that her half-brother sent the man to get money from her, that he shared the profit. Perhaps he hated her for inheriting most of the Havisham fortune. Nobody knows what happened to the two men. So now you know as much as I do. We talked the other things. I asked Herbert what his profession was. Oh, working in the city, he said. Insuring ships. There's a lot of money in that, huge profit. I began to think that Herbert must have greater expectations than I had. Oh, where are your ships at the moment? I asked admiringly. I haven't started yet. I'm working in the counting house just now. They don't pay me much, but I'm looking about me for a good opportunity. Then I'll make my fortune. Looking around the room at the old one furniture, I realized that Herbert must be very poor, and although he seemed full of hope for the future, somehow I thought he would never be very rich or successful. He and I spent a happy weekend visiting London together. Although it was all very exciting, I could not avoid noticing the dirt and bad smell and heat, and I compared it sadly with my village home, which now seemed so far away. The end.